Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest in our series of Future of the Service webinars. Today we are focusing on the prison service, and we're delighted that we are joined by David Oliver, Head of Prison Catering for England and Wales, and he has a panel with him today, which includes Crisci, Directorate of Safety and Rehabilitation at Her Majesty's Prison Services, and Carole Hainsworth, who's the Client Director for the prison contract at Bidfood. So we've got a nice mix of views and then people who can hopefully answer your questions. Just going to wait another 30 seconds or so as people log on and drift into the session. As always, the session will be chaired by David Fode, Group Editor at Public Sector Catering. So I think people are sort of largely making their way in now, David, so I'll pass over to you.
Right, well, thank you very much for that, Andrew. Yes, good afternoon. I'm David Fode, Editor of Public Sector Catering magazine, and thank you for joining us for the latest in our Future of Your Service webinars. Today, we're lucky enough to be granted the chance to meet David Oliver, who's the head of prison catering for England and Wales. It's a glimpse into an area of public sector catering that just quietly gets on with a hugely important job away from the public gaze. So a very good opportunity for people perhaps who would like to know more, but don't always get the chance to find out, for us to sort of tackle him today, and obviously for questions for you as well. His job, as I understand it, and he can obviously clarify this, is feeding 80,000 prisoners a day in the UK, 3 meals plus snacks, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now that's some undertaking, and it's all done on the very tightest of budgets. So it's my great pleasure to welcome today David Oliver, Head of Prison Catering. He's agreed to do a live interview with us today and then join us for a panel session later. So good afternoon, David.
Hello, good afternoon, David, and good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been a long time since we've had the opportunity to do this. And as David says, I don't get the opportunity very often to talk about what we do. So when I was asked about it, it was gratefully received, really, because yeah, there's a lot of perception out there about prison catering, and a lot of it is I say shrouded, but I can remember just a short story. In fact, Al, who's on the panel today, it was during the time when before he set up the Clink down there, that I went to his kitchen with a load of potential employees, because Al was running an NVQ scheme down there, and we took them for a tour of the prison. And when they got to the kitchen, they were absolutely amazed at the equipment that we have inside one of our kitchens. I don't know what they were expecting, perhaps a huge, I don't know, hole in the floor with water in it and a lot of porridge being paddled around. But, you know, we have some of the most up-to-date equipment in the services here. So, you know, we can provide a very, very good range of meals for prisoners, and do.
Good. Well, we shall look forward to finding out more about that. We're also joined by Carole Hainsworth, Client Director for Bidfood. Good afternoon, Carole.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm Carole Hainsworth. I've been with Bidfood for nearly 20 years now, but I've been lucky enough to work with Dave and his team since 2007. And I oversee the contract for Bidfood, working in partnership with HMPPS and the MOJ.
Excellent, thank you. And we also have Crisci, currently, if I've got this right, with the Directorate of Safety and Rehabilitation, part of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. Is that right, Al?
Yeah, that's right. That sounds very posh. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I'm Crisci. So I've worked for the prison service for over 25 years, but for the last 2 years, working directly for David Oliver. And the current work streams that I've got include Brexit, food supply contingency, which is becoming less and less as part of my job, but also COVID food supply contingency, and extensive work on looking at nutrition and prison menus.
Great. Thank you very much. And although he's not here to talk about it today, it's worth mentioning that Al was awarded an MBE for his work developing the well-known Clink Restaurant Prisoner Rehabilitation Scheme, which I think is perhaps a subject for another day. Right, a quick reminder to everyone now about how the webinar is going to work. Other than the panelists and me, everyone will be muted. If you want to get in touch during the webinar, you can put a question to the panelists using the Q&A function. Please include your name and company. But you don't have to wait until we start taking the questions. You can post one at any time. And if you just want to comment or get involved, then we have the chat function. Please use that as well. And remember to choose the option to all panelists and attendees so we can all enjoy your comments. We won't, unfortunately, be able to get to any questions you put in there. They'll be too difficult for us to find in time. Right, that's the preamble over. So, Dave, perhaps I can turn now to you with a few questions so we can just sort of find out a little bit more about what you do and how you manage to do it. Everyone assumes that you work to some of the tightest budgets in the public sector, but can you tell us how much you have to spend per prisoner per day and what you have to provide for that money?
Yeah, it's an often asked question, David. Prior to 2017, because it has changed since then, I'll come on to that in a second, the budget was set nationally at £2.02 as the last one. And after 2017, when governors were given devolved budgets, pretty much how much is spent on food for prisoners in their particular prisons is down to them to decide. That said, most prisons kept to the £2.02 because it was a kind of a good marker for them, and prison caterers, being as resourceful as they are, try their hardest to stick to that. The average at the moment, I think, is around £2.15. If we did a national, not what your budget is, but what you're actually spending, and with inflation, that would be about right. So if you look at it, it's around about that. Of course, with the amount of different prisoners we have, from young to old to to the female estate, and all of the different things we have to comply with, then the youngsters in particular, their budget is between £2.60 and £3.60 in some of it, because of the extras that they have to have. What do we have to provide for that? Well, we have to provide 3 meals a day, standard, of which the breakfast is usually a continental style pack up cereal type breakfast, which prisons are expected to enhance. And those are usually given out with the evening meal so that a prisoner can eat them the next morning before they get up and go to work or whatever it is they do. The lunch menu is predominantly a cold snack type meal to reflect what outside the prison gates eats in society these days. So that is anything from a sandwich to a baguette type fill in with maybe a soup, packet of crisps, fruit, yogurt, maybe, depending on up to the prison entirely and what they actually put in that. And then a substantial evening meal, a hot evening meal. One of the meals we say from policy, because obviously my main role is food policy in the prison service, is hot. They have to provide at least 1 hot meal a day. And that is usually, but not always, the evening meal. And of course, governed against that, we have all of the special diets that prisoners come into, and our actual menu structure is a pre-select menu, of which it's over a 4-week period and a minimum of 5 choices. Of course, add on to that the religious and the dietary needs of prisoners, and it can differ and does differ in each establishment depending on what they're faced with on that. So it's not an easy straight answer of it's the X amount of money, because it isn't. It really is down to a governor over his whole budget to spend what he wants to spend on food.
Okay, just as sort of a little bit of a supplementary there, Do you have nutritional standards you have to comply with on as well?
Yes, of course. Our nutrition is one of the areas that we are obviously exploring, and feeds very much into some of Al's works, which I'm sure he'll talk about later on. But yes, of course. But what we don't do, we don't measure nutrition on a daily basis, because being a pre-select menu, a prisoner could choose, and we've had this argument in the past with nutritionists and people that come and study and say this prisoner, for instance, is well malnutrition, basically because they've checked what he's eaten on that day or on 2 days, not what he's done on a balanced diet all the way through a week or whatever. So it skews the playing field quite a lot there. So we don't measure on a daily or a weekly basis. It's over a period of time, and nobody that I know of has ever left prison worse than they've come in. Let's put it that way, because we do look after them.
Okay, thank you. Now you sort of hinted at this a little bit with your previous answer, but perhaps if I can just sort of get you to expand a little bit on the profile of the prisoners that you essentially have to feed amongst the sort of 80,000 people in terms of like age and gender, and you've obviously got religious dietary considerations to throw into the mix as well. Could you give us a bit of a picture of what it is that you have to deal with every day?
Yeah, of course, prison and crime doesn't have any boundaries. So, we have to cater for people as young as kind of 15, 16 up until they're into their 80s and plus, and some people unfortunately do pass away in prison from old age and what have you, depending on their condition when they come in. So it's a huge task. And some prisons are mixed with it. It's not as if, some of the we don't have a prison specifically for older people, although there are 1 or 2 which are kind of going that way. They're mixed within the normal population, which is right and proper, and the same being for the cultural and religious prisoners that we have in. It's all mixed within. So a catering manager in the prison service has to have many hats and has to cater for a multitude of, you name a religion, and pretty much will have come across it, and not just religious diets, of course. We also have the cultural diets, of which we've been doing a lot of work. Again, I don't want to jump on Al's work that he's been doing with the vegans and the Vegan Society and the menus around that. He'll explain that, I'm sure, later on. And of course, vegetarians. And David, there's so many. I could be here for an hour talking about religious and cultural diets in the prison service, because thank God for Google sometimes, I have to say, because some of the, I had to deal with a fruitarian a year or 2 back now, and I'll be honest, I'd never even heard of what a fruitarian had. So but we deal with that. No one that comes into prison with a cultural or a medical or a religious diet will be told they can't have it, unless it's totally impractical and we know that it can't be done. So it's a job. It's a hard job for caterers, and I'm blessed every day for their professionalism out there for actually dealing with these problems and keeping it away from my desk. I know if I get an email come to my desk from most of the catering managers out there, it's not just a bleat. It's because they will have exhausted all of the possibilities and they need help. That's how much they kind of consume their own smoke out there, and it's really pleasing to know that I need to action something if I do get that email.
Okay. Now, in prison catering, that there's been research done in the past into sort of health and nutrition and its impact on things like behaviour and education. I'm not sure that the sort of results of this always get the sort of the widest audience they could do. So I'm just wondering, from your experience of things like this, whether there's anything you can share that might be useful for other parts of the public sector.
Well, we are engaged. Again, this comes more into Al's life and work that he's been doing over the last year. But there is research that has been carried out, and we're working with a few public, private bodies out there, like the Think Through Nutrition, you may have heard of, with Professor John Steen and his team out there, looking at how omega-3 is capable of reducing anxiety and violence within prisoners. And so there's a study being done about that. And others that we're doing around a standardized recipe base and menu system that we're doing is incorporating all this. And Al's been working very closely with quite a lot of esteemed people in that area to make sure that our dishes that we do put up will conform and hopefully assist a prisoner through his journey from when he comes in to when he leaves, or she, a better, you know, able to survive in society without having to reoffend. So this whole from when they come in to going out involves catering in quite a big way, because they come into prison very underneath. You know, I mean, it isn't unusual to come across a prisoner that has never used a knife and fork, for instance. Such a reliance they've had on fast foods on their growing up, you know. So, and very, very low basic and key skills. So the reading and writing side of life and the understanding of how to interact and socialize and eat properly and efficiently is something that we are really majoring on at the moment, to make sure that we've got the best information that we can for them. So yeah, it is a huge area that we're looking at the moment. And yes, I'm sure that when we've completed it and we've got something tangible to hang a hat on, if anybody's interested out there, of course, we'll be prepared to share that.
Okay, that's great. I've heard that schools and school caterers have to deal with children coming in with no sort of knife and fork skills, but quite astonishing that you can say the same thing about some of the people coming into prison.
Mm-hmm.
They've reached that stage of life. But...
Yeah, I know. It's always, nothing surprises me anymore, David, that's for sure.
Yeah. I want to move on to procurement now, Dave, which from my understanding is largely centralised within the prison service. So it would be interesting, I think, for other people in the within the public sector, perhaps who don't do that, to know the sort of the pros and cons from your point of view of buying in such large quantities for such a diverse customer base.
Yeah, I suppose for us, for me, I mean, we have a set of defined specifications for our commodities, which, you know, having a centrally based purchase, you know, for Bidfood as it is in this case, makes that so much easier for us and them to be able to purchase against that specification and get the right pricing done through, you know, with collaboration. So in that respect, you know, it is very good for that. And they've also been able to put in for us, because it's a good ordering portal where we can 24/7 as catering managers can put orders down. They have defined windows which they should use, but pretty much, you know, it helps with that. It helps big time with pricing, of course, if you can purchase, you know, ahead of the game. So, and the working relationship you get with a supplier, as Carole says, since 2007 we've butted heads and got, you know, and got round tables, and it's a long time to build up a relationship, and it works wonders, I have to say. And when you're dealing with one team, one central team, you can get problems resolved a lot easier too, of course, rather than having to go to that company, you know, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 different companies or whatever it might be. You know, and if there's an issue with a product, we can get straight on it, isolate it, and get to the bottom of where the issue is and sort it out. What are the cons of that? I suppose the biggest one is having all your eggs in one basket, to pardon the pun, you know, should, not that it will happen, that, you know, Bidfood go under, then, you know, you could say you're in lumber here, you know, we're going to have to come up with some kind of a contingency for that. But over the last year, when, you know, the whole world's gone mad, if ever there was going to be a problem, it would have been with that, and we haven't found one. So, you know, there's pros and cons, of course, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I worked when it was the other way. I think there was something like 21 different supplier base before we had central catering and a central supplier. And yes, you could go out to them and get a lot of short dated, very low price yogurts and misshaped pies and stuff like that. But why would we? The whole point is we had to do that because the budget was so low back then. and we shouldn't be offering our prisoners food which is short dated. One of the three pies won't have a top on it, kind of thing. And so with central purchasing like that, the product and the specification and the quality rose to a level across all of the prisons, not just the one or two that could get the best deal. So yeah, for us, that's definitely been a really good system that we've got, one that we're not looking to change anytime soon either.
Okay, and now you'll probably be aware that there's been growing interest in plant-based menus and dishes, and indeed we held our first plant-based week just a short time ago, just to acknowledge that fact and just flag up for caterers some of the sort of the trends, the issues, and some of the sort of products coming onto the market. Is this a trend that you're seeing in prisons?
It's a trend that we're aware of, David, at this stage, and I do know that of one prison that we've got in the service at the moment that has really embraced this at the moment, and we're keeping a close eye on it to see how it goes, because they're getting some quite good positive results from it. It's not something which we're looking to kind of look at across the piece, certainly not at the moment, but I know that within this menu system we've got, eating less meat and more plant-based products is definitely the way to go at the moment by everything that I read. And I know that we are looking at how we can integrate that and change things as things go forward, but it's not something which is, forefront. It's the forefront of what we're going to be doing, straight away. But yes, we'd be fools not to consider and look at how this is going to develop. And once it's been proven and it's out there working, and there's a solid base for looking at how you procure this and that, all that. I mean, we're looking at a few years down the line here, but yes, we are aware of it and we are definitely interested in it. That's for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know when Al introduced himself, he mentioned that sort of COVID food supply was sort of been part of his sort of remit recently. But I just wonder, from your perspective, how has the COVID-19 and all the sort of lockdowns and restrictions that have gone alongside that affected the work of catering teams in prisons around the country?
Absolutely huge. I'm not going to lie. It's been the most challenging year for us. I mean, if I can go back one step, Al mentioned, in his role, I asked him if he'd look at the Brexit problem, because that was the big thing. And it had the potential to disrupt food supplies, which is something that is, I just didn't want to go to bed at night sleeping thinking about the implications behind not having food delivered to a prison or delays in that. And so, of course, we put contingencies in place ourselves with Bidfood to actually mitigate it. And a heck of a lot of work between Bidfood and us took place to make sure that we had a process in place that should deliveries not come in, then we would have a basis of a meal that a prison can put out. And I'm not underestimating the amount of work that took. I mean, we've got over 1,000 lines on our commodity list, and Carole and her team rag rated that and continually rag rated that so that we would be able to keep changing where we needed to be able to see where the red, amber and green of potential issues were. And of course, it was on the bus, off the bus for that over months. So that was going to end on this date, then it wasn't. And so it got delayed and we were all jumping up and down about that because it caused more work. And then it kind of went quiet. And just when we thought we were coming through it, of course, we got hit by COVID. So not only did we have the prospect of not having any food coming into the country or being delayed, we might not have anybody in the kitchen to actually cook it, and so that gave us another whole raft of problems to overcome. And again, we sat down with a team of us and came up with a plan with Bidfood and how we could do that through contingency, ready meals, and the contingency that we had in place of ambient products being stored by prisons, and priority top 20 priority commodities that Bidfood, ensured us that if one of those commodities wasn't available, there'd be a duplicate, exchange for that should it need. We went everywhere and we did everything we can to support the caterers as best we can. And I think, well, it wasn't an easy road, but we got there. And catering managers, I said before, consume a lot of their own smoke, and they are very resourceful, very resourceful. I say I'm thankful every day in the messages that I was getting back, because they were suffering with COVID, of course, not just the prisoners, but staff, and and one or two caterers, and in some instances no caterers. We had to actually put plans in place for that, which we did, training up prison officers so that they know how to turn a combination oven on to heat up the ready meals, that kind of thing, which stood us in good stead. Thankfully, we didn't have to do that, I don't think, more than once or twice, because there was always one of the catering staff or with a trusted prisoner or something there to do that. And it's down to their resolve and their resourcefulness and adaptation that got us through this, because there was a few heady times there, as there were for all. But you can imagine in a closed place like a prison, the implications that would cause should we not have it. So yeah, in working in collaboration with Carole and her team and CCMD, and Andy Knight and Les Cook and his team that worked tirelessly for us to ensure that all of the meals were accounted for. Huge amount of work on all parts there, but yeah, now we're kind of transitioning, hopefully, out again, and things are starting to open up a little bit more. It's going to be a while before the prisons open up because of the nature of what we do, and we'll be probably the last to open up in society, I would think, fully. But plans have got to be in place for how we do that, how quickly, and then if it suddenly goes backwards again, can we continge for that again? And so we're working again with Carole and CCMD and now CCG, contracts and commercial group that's come on to monitor the contracts to ensure that we've got a contingency plan in place that will mitigate any of that going wrong again. But yeah, Dave, that was for, like it was for everybody, I'm sure, out there in other public sectors. It was a big headache for us, and one that I'm grateful I could probably sit on here now and say, thanks to them all, because without their hard work, we could have been in trouble. And but it didn't, because we do what we do in the public sector, don't we? We are what we are, and we work extremely hard in extremely trying conditions to make sure that it does work. And that goes for all of you out there too, not just in the prison service. I know that.
Well, I don't remember hearing any stories of prison food riots, so you obviously you managed.
Absolutely.
Okay. I wanted to just pick up on another procurement point now, Dave, because within the wider public sector, a lot of interest right now in trying to source more local and British produce. And I wondered whether that, as an issue, is something that the prison catering service is looking at too.
Well, we've always looked at it, to be fair, and the biggest downside, like in all public sectors, is cost. It is not the fact we don't want to do it. I mean, for instance, our milk, which we're a huge user of milk, is a British product, and wherever we can and get the right price down, we do look at British products. But we have to be real here. We have a defined overall budget, shall we say, in the governor that we've got responsibility for. So where we can, we will always buy British, but it's not a huge amount at the moment. But yes, I mean, I suppose if you look at it, we're paid by the government, and yet we're expected to get as much British product as we can, and we do. And it's a chicken and the egg, isn't it? Where's the money coming from to pay for this extra at the moment? So yeah, I'd love to buy more, wouldn't we all? And we will continue to serve. I know Carole and CCMD, sorry, that's contracts and commercial group, by the way, sorry, are always looking at ways if we can increase our British purchasing power, and we'll continue to do that.
Obviously, budgets then are a challenge. What are some of the other big challenges that you face in your role?
Recruitment is a big one. I think that's across the piece. And you know, we're all fishing in the same pool, aren't we? You know, for caterers, and we know caterers are very they'll stay somewhere a couple of years, get it on the CV, and move on to either a better job or to increase that CV. It's just a huge challenge for us. We're looking at apprenticeships at the moment, not like a lot of other people are, to try and bring people on. And for me, I think what the public sector needs to do on that more is look at how, and I'm sure David has not lost on you. I know I haven't been able to attend many of the meetings, but I'm sure retention and within our sectors is key here, because if they haven't got anywhere they can go up the ladder, I mean, I was fortunate enough to make that transition up the ladder. And if there isn't a transition up the ladder, then they will look elsewhere, because, you know, it can become Groundhog Day once you've got used to that seasonal working and how it works. Some people are really happy to do that. Other people, you know, that they want to get on. So, you know, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we definitely face in certainly prison service is how we recruit and how we retain, and you know, within that. And of course, we're always looking at training, how we looking at training our prisoners, because we do have what I would call a perfect contract catering kind of environment in the prison. You know, it's realistic work from the day a prisoner comes into work to the day that they leave. This isn't cooked to destroy, this is cooked to serve, you know, and training them up and qualifying them in that is something that's been looked at again. It's been tried in the past to have some success, but we're now looking at it more nationally again, which will help. So that's a challenge facing us. Of course, the government's, increasing government's legislative look at how we procure, how we label, those are always big challenges for us coming in. And of course, we've got Natasha's law coming in October, and we're looking at how that affects us. And we're waiting for Public Health England and Food Standards Agency to get back to us on exactly what that will mean to us, because the way that I've read it, and I know Al's read it too, is that it might not affect us too much in regard to the way that we pre-select our menus. The prisoner pre-selects the menu, even on a sandwich, and we then make it that next day. Means that depending how you read the words, means that actually we would be okay there, but our staff messes where we make sandwiches and sell them the next day, where you don't know what's in them and they're not being picked, that would fall under that law. I am an advocate, though, of just because we fall outside, it doesn't mean to say we shouldn't bother. And it's an area that we will be looking at to see that, you know, is it right and proper to actually explain and put on your sandwiches and your meals exactly what they contain. I mean, we do have menu specifications, which we have for all hours, which prisoners can look at before they make that choice. So we're kind of covered there, but can we do more? I'm certain that we can. And all these pressures that come in from government and different legislative bits that come in, of course, they're always a challenge for us and everybody else, of course, but you have to do them. And it's how we get, you know, how we do that. And once we get a little bit clearer, because the devil's always in the detail with these documents, depending how you read it, and nothing's ever clear, not as far as I can see. They will comply, David, you know, and will hopefully go above that too, to obviously to build in that, you know, resilience.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know that you've been doing some work on nutrition and menus, and we're going to be asking Al a little bit about that, because I know he's been working specifically on that. But perhaps you can just sort of tell us the context of this. Why are you doing that, and why are you doing it now?
It's something that's been talked about ever since I joined the service some 22 years ago now, but was never embraced because there's a lot, again, if we're looking at pros and cons of a standardized menu system here. Pros are, yes, you know, that on day, you know, on it's Tuesday, so we've got chicken on in the evening, and we've got, you know, liver on it, whatever, you know, in every single prison in the land. So for procurement and stuff would make things so much easier and could probably forward buy. What it takes away, though, of course, is a caterer's ability to innovate more. You know, no two prisons that we've got are the same. They're not alike. They're spread out all over the country. Lots and lots of different issues of servicing and how we get it to a hot plate, that kind of thing. So it was never something that was considered to be a priority. Is it a priority now? Not a priority, no. But I think, you know, that with all the government guidance coming down on nutrition and giving a prisoner a whole lifestyle, whole healthy lifestyle culture, if we offered a standardized menu and recipe system, for instance, I don't have to have a standard menu, but if we have standardized recipes which are costed, nutritionally balanced, blah, 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 then that gives a caterer the option of picking that one out and knowing that it's nutritionally balanced, and here's the actual cost of it, saving them a load of money. And again, for us purchasing wise, it would make a lot more sense for us. And we live in different times. We are moving in different times. So, you know, and the Public Health England were tasked with looking at prison catering from a parliamentary joint committee that took place a couple of, well, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, take away COVID, to look at how we provide meals for prisoners, and is it the right way of doing it? And it really was an ideal place to start for us then, that we've been talking about anyway. In fact, we had started some work on it. So then to link in with public health, and Al will talk about this in a bit more detail, and other parties to provide what we would hope to be an ultimate, for the prison service anyway, but I'm sure it can be adapted, menu system, like I say, which is nutritionally balanced, costed, and goes across the piece, is where I think we need to go to keep ourselves in the game, really. Because, but that said, you know, what we do at the moment, cook serve, has been in the prison service forever, and it stood us in good stead. Nobody's ever turned around to us and said it's wrong, you know, because it suits the way that we have to do our meals, and we do them to a really good standard. But yeah, we've got to keep going. I think the time is now right, with all of this legislation, to help catering managers to get over this. And I think it's incumbent on us from headquarters to come up with a solution. It might not be for all, but it can be adapted. And, you know, we're a long way down the road on that now. In fact, we would have been there had it not been for the world going crazy over the last year. But we'll get there. You know, we're absolutely on top of it. And Al's been working extremely hard. But I won't steal his thunder, because I know you'll be coming on to that in a little while for Al to answer.
Indeed, yes. And thank you very much, Dave. And indeed, that is a cue now to bring in both Al and Carole, if I can. And Al, if you're there, I'd like to turn to you first. Dave sort of outlined the sort of the thinking that's behind this, but perhaps you could just give us a little bit of your own overview now of the bit more detail of the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, of course. So there are 3 main work streams I'm looking at with regards to nutrition. In no particular order, the first thing I started looking at and researching was vegan meals, plant-based meals. And that basically started off with a survey just to see what the establishments were offering in terms of not specifically the menus, but in terms of supplements, because I was aware, and Dave is aware, that every prison was giving out a weekly pack to vegan prisoners. So I just wanted to see if there was a consistent approach. And we found there wasn't, and some people were possibly spending more than they needed to. on giving out food supplements. So I had an idea to set up a little team of a catering manager and the Vegan Society. And together we worked on a new 4-week menu cycle, which offered a consistent approach to catering managers and ensured that they weren't spending money unnecessarily on foods which perhaps weren't doing what needed to be done anyway. So that's been created. It's ready to be distributed and will be to every catering manager. As Dave said earlier, it will be up to them whether they use it or not. At this stage, it's not mandatory. However, we fully expect most catering managers to want to use it, purely because the Vegan Society have worked on it and endorsed it. And we know it will meet the needs of the vegan prisoners. So that's one stream. The second is standard menus or recipes. So what I've done there, I've worked closely with the NHS, Public Health England, DEFRA, Bidfood, and a PhD student who's studying nutrition in prisons as part of her PhD. And I've engaged with 3 catering managers, one from children's prisons, one from women's prisons, and one from adult male prisons. So what we've given them a remit that is basically following government guidelines on protein, carbs, salt, sugar, saturated fats, etc. Given them some broad guidelines and asked them to go away and create a menu, 3 menus that will meet the needs of those of that cohort of prisoners, bearing in mind their different nutritional and calorific requirements. So that's being done as we speak. Actually, prior to this meeting, Carole and I from Bidfood were in a meeting with Public Health England and DEFRA discussing this, and the NHS. So that's ongoing work, and we're hoping by the end of September to have 3 nutritionally analysed and balanced menus that meet all the requirements of all our prisoners, really, whether they be female children or elderly gentlemen or 30-year-old adult males. So that's an ongoing piece of work, which is really interesting and exciting. And the third one is more to do with how food can affect brain health, as well as reduce levels of anxiety, etc. Now, I've set up a pilot project in 2 prisons, working really closely on that pilot with Think Through Nutrition, headed by Professor John Steen, but also with Oxford Brookes University, Public Health England and DEFRA, as well as the catering manager and staff from those prisons. So it's a pretty big meeting when we have one. And what we're looking at doing there is we're creating an education package for prisoners. So we're going to give them lots of nutritional education and information. While we do that, we will monitor menu choices. So we're going to compare what they were choosing before, what they're currently choosing, and what they choose after. Hopefully we will see that we've influenced their menu choices in a positive way, typically steering them to eat more oily fish, more fruit, veg, fiber, pulses and nuts and seeds, etc., and try and steer them away from the high fat, high salt processed foods. We have a strong feeling that the education package will do that. The other thing we're going to measure at the same time is if there's been any change to medical appointments, i.e. reduction in medical appointments, better general health and well-being, obesity, diabetes, but also levels of anxiety and self-harm. So we're going to measure all that within this project, and if the results are positive, then we will seek the correct permissions and approvals to roll it out on a national scale. And then just a couple of things just to add, sort of build on what Dave was saying. As part of the COVID pandemic, obviously our prisoners, just the same as the rest of the population, needed to isolate in a lot of cases and didn't get out and about in the fresh air. Therefore, there was a risk to a vitamin D deficiency. Within the last year, we've managed to work with health services and secured vitamin D free issue to all our prisoners for the time being. And with regards to the plant-based, because I know you're really keen on this, David, it's always featured in Public Sector magazine. The prison that Dave referred to has actually gone to 50% plant-based menu, and looking to move that on to a 70% plant-based menu. The reaction has been really positive, which, to be honest, we're pleasantly surprised. We're pleasantly surprised to see. So hopefully we can build that into our new menus as well. Yeah, so hopefully that gives you an overview of the work I've been doing.
It does indeed, and some very interesting things. And I would hope we might be able to sort of come back and revisit this, and when you're ready with the trials and pilot studies finished, and possibly able to talk to us in a little bit more detail about what you found, because I think there are obviously implications for the caterers throughout the public sector. Just one point, Al, before I move on to Carole, the menus that you said you hoped might be ready by September, at that stage, will they then sort of go for trials themselves? Is that the plan?
Yeah, so the menus are, people involved in creating those menus are not just, Public Health England and leading academics and nutritionists to analyse them, and the catering managers, but it's also prisoners involved right from the beginning in creating and developing those menus. And the menus, part of that work involves standard recipes. So each recipe will be costed, tried and tested by those establishments before we complete the project.
Okay, that sounds great. Right, perhaps I can turn to you now, Carole. And obviously, Bidfood's an important partner with the Prison Catering Service. You've been sort of mentioned by both Dave and Al for the role that you play. Perhaps you could just describe to us very briefly, what is the current relationship with the Prison Service and Bidfood?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we started our relationship back in 2007, and over the last 14 years, we've really developed on that. And it's not just about delivering the food to the prison. The partnerships and the initiatives that we work on together are just working collaboratively so well on so many different areas. And like Al's talked about the menus, we are involved heavily on that. But just touching on something that Dave talked about earlier, the government initiatives with the SME and UK country of origin, that area has been key for us. And I mean, so pleased to report SMEs in the last year, as circa 65% of the national contract is bought from SMEs. And again, with UK as country of origin at the moment, we're in excess of 50%. So huge positives and huge areas. And it's just working together. It is like anywhere else, but the amount of dietary requirements, religious requirements, they all have to be covered. And it's something that we do together.
Okay, now when Dave was answering questions, he mentioned the impact of COVID, and I imagine that that's a challenge that you had to face together. tell us a little bit about what it was like from your perspective in helping them to get the food that they needed to the prisons.
Yeah, like Dave said, and as everybody said, it's been challenging for the whole of hospitality, but for the prisons, we set up a project group with all the teams across the MOG, so HMPPS, CCG, CCMD, looking at what we needed to do in the early days, making sure that we sent ambient products out to the prisons in case there was any issues within an establishment that we couldn't gain access. Fortunately, that hasn't been the case, and we've managed to deliver, but it's really weekly calls, conferences, Zoom meetings, catching up, making sure we're on top of everything. If there's been issues with product availability, it's finding an alternative that is suitable and to specification. So same as everybody, there's been challenges, but we've made it through. We haven't missed a meal. The deliveries have been getting through, no problem. And the prisons have adapted and worked with us where we've needed to, like Dave said about the staff, where we've had issues. We've found solutions together.
Okay, now you've mentioned the success in getting SME suppliers on board, but just for suppliers in general, what's the best approach from them to you to sort of get their products considered for the prison service list?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the first instance, obviously, just getting direct contact with myself, and we've got a corporate procurement manager for anything that you believe would be suitable for the MOJ, and then in turn, we would look first things, obviously, making sure it meets the specification for what the prison are looking for. And as Al touched on as well, prisoners are involved right at the very beginning. There would be no product added to the prison list unless we have it's a CAP commodity appraisal panel. So that would be seen by a number of head office people, catering staff within establishments, and prisoners to make sure that it was acceptable for everybody before it would progress. But we also have specifically for SMEs, annually, we have an opportunity for them to come and present to key personnel within HMPPS. We had to postpone it last year, unfortunately, but we are looking towards doing that again this year. So it's another great opportunity for SMEs to actually contribute to a national contract. Excellent,
thank you. Dave, perhaps I can take this to you now from your perspective. Obviously, if a product meets the specifications, that's one thing, but what else are you looking for if you're looking to add products or change products on your list?
As Carole said, our biggest thing is this CAP process, this commodity appraisal panel. If I expand on that a bit, it's something that came in with this contract. Before a product can come onto our list, it is commodity tested usually at a prison. And it's made. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking there. That's one of the foibles, of course, of working from home. And we'll get a panel put together, which Carole and some of her team, some of my team, prisoners, crucially, and anybody from the governors to the board of visitors and anybody that wants to be part of this panel. We come to a prison and we test that panel organoleptically, if I can say that word, as well as visual and everything that needs to be done. If it passes the CAP, then it will be considered to go onto the list. If it doesn't, then it won't. So there's no product that comes onto our list unless it's been capped, as we call it. So that's the process, and then of course, Bidfood will do then their procuring bits and look at because one thing we don't look at per se is cost at that stage. It's just to meet the other criteria first, then Carole and her team will then start looking at the cost side of it. Can we then afford to have that on, that kind of thing? But it's a really well-proven system of making sure that our products, A, meet spec, and B, are acceptable to a prisoner.
Great, thank you. Al, I've got several questions I've seen from prison caterers and others. who are still a little bit in the dark about what the implications of Natasha's law, which comes in place into force on October the 1st. From your perspective, can you give them any guidance on the labelling requirements and anything else that they might need to do?
Yeah, well, I've trawled through it, and as I see it, and bear in mind, I'm literally waiting in the next day or so to have what I'm going to say confirmed by the Food Standards Agency, who I'm talking to about this before we actually go public and inform the catering managers. But my understanding is because all our packed meals within prison kitchens are pre-selected, so pre-ordered, not bought off the shelf. Then our current systems, which involve allergen information and ingredient information that is already available to prisoners on menus and at points of service, will be sufficient. So for our normal day-to-day business. But in the case of where we provide staff meals or visitors meals where something is pre-packed and bought from the counter, then the labelling laws will need to be will come into play. So everything will need full labelling. The caveat to that is though that, as I see it, if the sandwich, or if let's use that as an example, is made in front of the customer, ordered and made in front of the customer, again, the full ingredient list does not need to be put on a label. So that's how I see it as it stands. But the only reason that we haven't communicated officially yet to the catering managers around the country is we want the Food Standards Agency to rubber stamp what I've just said and to confirm it, just to make sure that we've got it exactly right, which we hope to do hopefully in the next week or so, which, you know, still gives plenty of time until October the 1st. But what we have done prior is to send a global email out a week ago to all catering managers, just saying to them that they need to research on their own accord, same as I've done, just to start to get their head around how the new laws will implicate their catering. Okay,
thank you for that. We're sort of running down the clock a little bit here, but I just wanted to ask you, Dave, about equipment. Within the public sector, a number of the different parts of it have got net zero by 20, whatever it is, in their minds. I'm just wondering, is this something that the prison service is looking at in general? And if so, within catering, is equipment part of the plan? In other words, sort of buying newer, more efficient, more sustainable equipment?
Yeah, well, what we have every year is we have a sum of money that's allocated to me to look at capital equipment within prisons, and that generally is done through a contract that we have. And are we looking at? Yes, we are. We're seriously looking at how, because the usuals, we have Rationale, you know, we have all different makes out there, but generally through one company, third party suppliers with inside that. And we go out to prisons and we ask them what their demand is this year, and then we have a look and see what equipment, we can supply them within that budget. Yes, I mean, we are always looking at more innovative, more efficient operating, and the big players like Rationale, for instance, they're pretty much on board with this anyway. So, I find if you stick to the main suppliers, you're pretty much going to be okay. It's just that the costs might rise with any innovation that's out there. But yeah, of course we are, because we're a huge user of power, and for these 80,000 odd prisoners that we've got 3 times a day, although we don't use the oven particularly 3 meals a day because 2 of them are cold. So that in itself is a big saving in regards to sustainability and stuff. But does beg the question of, I'm surprised a question hasn't come up about that, of why we have these huge kitchens when we only produce 1 meal a day hot. You know, and it is a question that I do get asked a lot. And the answer to that basically is this cook serve system that we have in place serves us well, and we do need to be able to provide that level of service going forward. I think there will be a change, not in my time, but because I've tried it 2 or 3 times and it's been battered away for good reason. But there are more efficient ways of delivering meals, we know that. Yeah, equipment, just to answer that question, equipment, yes, of course, we are looking, or every year, one of my team looks at equipment and how we can look and change and is it a better, do you know, but a lot of the time, the equipment has got to be soldier proof in the prison service. You know, it can't be delicate because it's going to be operated by prisoners, and prisoners are not user friendly when it comes to closing doors sometimes and stuff and banging other equipment up against it. You know, it's a fact of life. It has to be robust. So it has to go through the same kind of a CAP process, if you will, before it can be considered to come onto us. But yeah, in terms of how a unit operates, yeah, of course we're looking at it. Yeah, we are.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am conscious that we've got several questions that we haven't been able to get to, and we're running out of time now. But perhaps I can ask the panelists if we could put those questions to them afterwards, and then post any replies that you can make when we upload the video onto the website. But right now, because we're coming to the end of our hour, I'd like to go to each of you in turn, just for a sort of a final thought. Carole, perhaps to you on some, whatever, the issues that have come up, or maybe something that hasn't that you wanted to talk about.
No, to be honest, it's just been really good to be involved in this, to show how working at the partnership has worked for both sides, and looking forwards to what we can do together in the future. But absolutely any questions, more than happy to pick up afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, that's very helpful. And Al?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I mean, I've always had a passion about food, obviously being a caterer, but also on nutrition and fresh, healthy food. So I'm just really pleased that the work that I'm doing now for Dave hopefully will have a positive impact on the whole population, which for me is really satisfying. If we can make a difference to 80,000 people and improve their view on food, and hopefully that will roll out to the wider population, i.e. their families, their wives and children as well. So I think it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to completing the work and continuing it, really.
Okay, thank you. And Dave, final thought?
Yeah, first of all, thanks everybody for taking an hour out of your day to get an insight, and I hope we've given you an insight into the prison service catering. We're living in a different world now, an ever-changing world, and you know, I've been fortunate enough to be in the service for 22 years now, and before that 24 years in the army. So I've pretty much spent all of my adult working life in the civil, yes, in the public sector, and it's been an enjoyable ride, shall we say, one that is ever evolving, and every 4 or 5 years something else changes within it, and we embrace that. And certainly out there, you know, colleagues, if you wish to contact me and get more of an in-depth look at what we do and how we do it, then please, you know, either get it through David or through the magazine. I'm sure my contact details will be on there somewhere. Please do so, because not only can I hope you learn a little bit from us, but we can also learn something from you. It is this, when I say partnership, public sector is a partnership. And we should all be pulling together more and more. So thank you very much for listening to us this afternoon.
Yeah, a very positive note to end on, and thank you very much. That, I'm afraid, has to be it for today. My thanks once again to David Oliver, Carole Hainsworth and Al Crisci, and to you too for joining us today. On the final webinar slides that you're going to see, there'll be the logos of the Public Sector Catering 100 Group sponsors, whose generous support makes events like today's possible. We thank them and we thank you for joining us today. And finally, we will be back on July the 8th with the next of the Future of Your Service webinars. And we'll be talking to Sue Cawthray, Chair of the National Association of Care Catering. We'll hope to see you then. Goodbye.
Thank you.